So in a couple of months, Valve will start to ship out Steam Decks to customers, starting, I assume, with the people who got their orders in immediately as Steam was crashing left and right with everyone rushing to try to put their $5 down on the Steam Deck. But Valve did something interesting the other day. They uploaded a teardown of the system, and it was more of a partial teardown. They took like the back off, but that gave us a good enough look at the internals to go over a few things here today. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave Plus channel, make sure you subscribe down below. So let's head over here. They had a full video. I will link it down below in the description if you want to check it out for yourself. And they did start with the backing of the Steam Deck, just kind of going over how you get the shell apart, which mostly involves just kind of grabbing all of these Phillips head screws they have around the edges here, at which point you just pry it apart. Basically, the rest is clips. I don't know if I would use my fingernails like the person here did. I would probably get like a plastic spudge tool, a spudger, that lets you then kind of separate the two halves. But once you get this backing off, it is pretty easy to get to everything. Now, the Steam Deck is large. Like, no one is looking at this and saying, wow, that looks pocket-sized. It comes with a case for a reason. It's a big handheld system. But it seems very purposeful for it being this large because everything is spread out and mostly modular. That's a good thing. Now, in this video, Valve did mention, or the person here taking it apart did mention, that Valve will have like replacement parts of some kind. The biggest one they pointed out has to do with the analog stick, which, I mean, it makes sense why they would be mentioning that because we've seen so much talk around Joy-Con drift with the Switch. Valve is probably thinking ahead like, you know, we should just let people know, hey, the analog stick is easy to replace. In fact, it is its own board and you can get to it immediately. They already took out the right stick because remember, we're looking at it from the back. So this part over here would be the right stick. Now looking over at the left stick, which is still in, I mean, we could see there's 3 screws right here and then 1 ribbon cable that has to be unplugged. This pops out. It's all one piece because remember, that top part of the analog stick has like a haptic feedback, or it's able to tell pressure of like the thumb when you're pushing down on it and all this. So it has an extra sensor in there. It just comes as one piece, which tells me if, for example, you do experience some drift on the analog stick, it'll be pretty easy to change out. You get that backing apart, which looked like it was maybe 8 Phillips head screws. You pry it apart, and then you just do a couple of Phillips head screws here, boom, and you're off and running with the new analog stick. Now, looking around here, you might be wondering, okay, where is the main motherboard? It's actually this rectangle right here. This is the entirety of the motherboard for the Steam Deck. Yeah, like people are going to be a little surprised, but these boards don't have to be large with the SoCs that they're supplying. They're not exactly pulling a ton of power. Otherwise, you wouldn't have much of any battery life. And even though the Steam Deck is being talked about as having like, what, a couple of hours for intensive games, that's still pretty good considering what it's playing. And the board being so small here might seem strange because the system is so large itself. But remember, there are a lot of other components. And the idea that this is as modular as it is pretty impressive. Right down here, there's a little square. That would be where your M.2 drive is. So if you do buy a 64 gig model, you should be able to replace it. Like the entire time in this video, Valve is saying, do not do this. Do not open this system up at all. It doesn't look that bad. There was a cover here over this, but that just pulled away after doing, I think it was 3 or 4 screws. And then it's a pretty straightforward process to remove this. The battery is also pretty easy to get to. It's just this black square kind of right here. It almost looks like it has like a bit of an elbow here. I have to see it a bit more just to see if that's the case, or if this is just something coming off of it, maybe covering up a piece here. The fan, also easy to get to, which is something that comes up a lot. Fans tend to get clogged up with portable systems and home consoles because the airway is generally pretty small right in here. Usually I have just like dust bunnies and dirt get clogged up, and then you will have higher than normal temperatures and it can tend to have the system shut down. Now, these lower power chips don't run into that issue as much as like say a PlayStation 4 Pro or an Xbox One or an Xbox 360, anything that pulls a ton of power and can have its air supply kind of cut off a bit there, that's where you run into a problem. But still, it seems easy to get to this, as you have looks like a couple of screws. This will pop up, and then you can kind of just clean this up where the heatsink is and drop it down. You can also, I guess, change out the thermal compound, which I'm sure there'll be a lot of testing around that just to see if you can get better temperatures. But as I've seen with these low power chips, they don't really get that hot to where even basic thermal compound changing isn't going to do a lot when it comes to temperatures. We do have our back macro buttons here. There are 4 of them. Those are part of the same board, it looks like, right here. That's right behind, I guess that'd be our button board right here. So that is also modular. Basically, if you pulled all of this apart, you're going to end up with a bunch of small boards. In fact, I like this a lot. We can see up here, that's our headphone jack on a separate board once again. We also have several buttons that are right here also on that board. The reason I like this is because the headphone jack gets damaged all the time. Like, I see it come in quite often, and for other systems and cell phones, and if it was a separate board, it made it a million times easier than if it was on the main board and the manufacturer decided to just go all one piece. That was really annoying. So I do like this. And you know what? I hope Valve looks to provide most of these boards. Like, I'm sure they'll look into it and be like, okay, maybe the button board isn't going to break as much as, say, the headphone jack board. But I'm kind of hoping they just look at all of this and pick out the ones that are most likely to break and just make them available for purchase on their website. I do want to mention something that I'm a little concerned of here, and we'll have to see if this is the case because we can't completely tell just from this angle, but up here would be where our USB-C port is, and there are 2 screws right here, 2 Phillips head screws. That's most likely for support, like so that this board is pressed up against the bracing of the system itself, which you can actually kind of see some of the bracing. Usually what they'll do is they'll put the board, everything will kind of screw into like one piece that is designed to keep the system from flexing, which you can see parts of it kind of around the battery and like down around here. It's almost like think of it like a skeleton for the system that everything sort of screws into. If we removed all this stuff, you would just probably see it right behind here. But those screws going through tell me that most likely this USB-C charge port is soldered to the main board. Now, the reason that is concerning is because if that USB-C port breaks, you have to solder a new one on, and it's not part of, say, a separate modular board like what we see here with the headphone jack. And sometimes you get lucky and manufacturers will have the power port on its own board that then runs to the main motherboard itself. That's something to keep in mind because along with the headphone jack, power ports tend to get damaged, especially for something that's a portable device. Maybe the charger comes out at the wrong angle or something and then you damage it, at which point you have to either replace this through fairly small soldering. Like, we're talking, you might break out the magnifying glass to double check the pins and all of this, or you replace this entire board. But I do like what I've seen so far in this early look inside the Steam Deck. The biggest thing here is a lot of it's modular, and that's great for repairability. But as usual, when I do get it, we'll tear it down, we'll check it out, and we'll pull all the boards out and see what we're dealing with and see if Valve comes up with boards that we can buy and replace and find out how much those are as well. Let me know what you guys think about the internals here that we've seen for the Steam Deck. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.